Ever since Bernie Sanders entered the presidential race, I've been hearing from his fans, hundreds of them, who believe he's not getting enough media coverage. This weekend, there's been lots of coverage, but not the kind he wants, because of a data breach by campaign aides. Last night at this Democratic debate on ABC, Sanders apologized for the breach and said he'd fire anyone else who was found to be involved. I wonder if this is a case where, as they say, all press is good press? Let's ask Sanders campaign manager Jeff Weaver. He's in Manchester this morning. Jeff, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Brian. Great to be here.
Do you think it's a situation where the press is interested in scandal, interested in sensationalism, your campaign versus Hillary Clinton's and you versus the DNC, but not paying attention to policy?
Well, look, I think what the complaint has been, and I think you hear it from a lot of people, and I think people who watch the news see it, you know, too often the media, the mainstream media, treats politics like it's a football game or it's a soap opera or it's some kind of, you know, personality conflict. Look, what politics is supposed to be about is how we in a democratic society address the real issues confronting Americans. And often that doesn't have a lot of good visuals attached to it, right? So I think it's easy to cover what the media perceives to be some kind of conflict or strife, but they don't. You know, it's much harder to cover complicated economic and social issues in this country.
Well, were you disturbed that this was the first question at the debate last night, that David Muir and Martha Raddatz went right at this issue of the voter database?
Was I surprised? Is that what you asked?
Were you disturbed by it?
I wasn't surprised. Oh, no, I wasn't. Look, it's been in the news for the last a few days. You know, obviously there were some serious issues raised. You know, the fact that the DNC's firewall fell. Some young staffers on our campaign obviously did the wrong thing. One of them has been fired. Two others have been suspended while we finish our investigation. Other disciplinary action may be handled out. So there's no doubt there was something, you know, wrong that happened there. And then, you know, in a stunning move, the DNC then cut off access to us having access to our own data, essentially giving our campaign the death penalty. We had to go to federal court to try to get it back. You know, I mean, there were elements of that story which I think raised some serious concerns. So it doesn't surprise me or it didn't disturb me that it was asked first. I mean, we fully expected that was going to be the case.
Do you think the DNC could be leaking to the media? You all have been concerned all along the DNC is trying to help the Clinton campaign.
Well, listen, there was another firewall failure at the DNC back in October that we discovered. We reported it at that time to the DNC. I mean, it seems to us pretty clear that a bunch of our data probably was compromised. We didn't run to the media. We didn't raise a big stink about it. In this particular instance, you know, the DNC, I think, clearly was talking to the media. They had documents. Activity logs that we needed to do our investigation that they had, that they were leaking to the media and not giving to us, right? So, yes, there was clearly an attempt to, I think, to gain political points instead of really helping this investigation.
Let me ask you about this issue of fair coverage, because recently your campaign put out a press release with a pretty provocative headline. It said there was a Bernie blackout on network nightly newscasts. This is based on Andrew Tyndall data we shared on the show a couple weeks ago. It shows that Sanders has been covered a whole lot less than Clinton on the nightly news. So what are you all doing about it? Besides press releases, what are you doing to gain more media attention?
Well, look, what we're going to do is talk about the issues. You know, whether the media chooses to cover it or not. You know, we have more support than Donald Trump does in our race than he does in his race, frankly, in terms of numbers of supporters. And yet he gets a tremendous amount of coverage because he says outrageous things that are easy to cover.
But
we're not going to play that game.
But that's an incomplete answer. You must be lobbying behind the scenes for more attention, right? You must be calling the networks demanding more airtime.
No, that's not how we play it. What we do is we put out press releases, we hold press events, we hold public meetings, and the media can choose to come whether they want to or not. That's up to them. Sometimes they come. They often do, obviously, as a presidential race. I mean, how much they actually put on the air, that's a totally different question. And,
well,
you know,
Sanders likes to say, he likes to refer to the press as the corporate media, the mainstream media. When you say that, do you think that you're purposefully being downplayed because of your economic message, that it makes broadcast networks owned by media companies uncomfortable, or do you think it's not about that?
Well, I think what it is as you watch the news, you too often do not see anything that reflects the real struggles that middle-income and working families face in this country. I mean, the senator went to Baltimore recently, to the area where Freddie Gray was murdered in Baltimore. You know, how often does the media go and report on communities like that have been abandoned by our society, that do not have any economic investment? There's a lot of despair and lack of hope. Where's the ongoing media coverage of those kinds of quiet tragedies going on in America?
My last question for you is about what you all are doing, again, to change the dynamic. Are you all relying more on Facebook and Twitter, for example? I know Sanders is making his own videos. Is that a strategy to create coverage on your own because you don't feel you get enough from the NBCs and the ABCs and the CBSs of the world?
Well, look, we try to communicate with voters in any way that we can. We are very, very active on social media platforms. We have a tremendous following on those platforms. You know, it is one of the ways that we can get around the fact that the corporate media doesn't really want to cover a lot of the issues we're talking about. So we do reach out to people. I think you see in our overwhelming support among young people, that's reflected in the fact that, you know, social media is disproportionately viewed by young people. I think as people see and hear what Bernie Sanders has to say, they move to him. And in this case, you know, our reliance on social media has really helped us move young people in this race.
He keeps gaining more Twitter followers. Even during the GOP debates, he gains more Twitter followers than most of the GOP candidates, which is sort of interesting. Thank you for being here this morning. Good to see you. Let's bring our panel back for a moment and talk more about the debate, including this awkward moment for Hillary Clinton. Watch last night.
In a similar time frame, raises for CEOs up more than 200%.
Sorry.
Now, that was well played by Mrs. Clinton, but I wonder if it was appropriate for ABC to show her empty podium. Eric Deggans, Jane Hall, and David Zerwick rejoin me now. Jane, what did you think? My sources say the Clinton campaign did not cry foul about this, but should ABC have maybe waited another minute?
They might have given her another minute. You know, she had to comment on it in the first debate where this happened. You know, I want to say something in response, if I may, about Bernie Sanders. I think that he has been woefully undercovered. I mean, if you look at the Tyndall report, he got 20 seconds and Donald Trump got 81 minutes in the last year. You know, I think people in the media are more afraid of being accused of being liberal by the Republicans than they are of being accused of being corporate. I mean, I don't think it means they're corporate, but I think Sanders was treated dismissively, like an old guy with weird hair. He has been building and building. He has Trump's support. I think his campaign has a very legitimate complaint.
That's why I wanted to bring you all back, actually. I'm really interested in this issue for Sanders. David, what do you think? Do you think there's an intentional bias against Sanders, or is it maybe accidental that he gets less attention? Because it is true, the nightly newscasts have paid a lot more attention to Clinton than Sanders or O'Malley this year.
Yeah, you know, I think part of it, Brian, really is that Hillary Clinton is still assumed to be winning this race. And when he made a surge, he did get more coverage. But then as he fell back, again, it went back to her. I think that's part of it. I am not ready to believe the corporate media argument. I mean, I've covered this a long time, and I'm as skeptical of the networks as anybody in the world. Just ask any network executive. I don't believe they're doing it for those reasons. But, Brian, I do want to please say one thing about what the Sanders spokesperson said about Bernie Sanders, about him coming to Baltimore and visiting the Freddie Gray's neighborhood and saying that the corporate media didn't want to cover that story. We needed Bernie Sanders to come there. The Baltimore Sun has poured every resource it has into covering that story. And by the way, CNN's done a very good job of covering it as well, given the vast international agenda they have. They've paid a lot of attention. Bernie Sanders got there late, and we didn't need him to come to Baltimore to tell anybody about that story.
Hey,
that's really upsetting.
I would chime in and say NPR has also covered that story.
Yes,
so,
you're right.
I do want to make one point about the undercoverage of Sanders and the overcoverage of Trump. I think a lot of this is also about who gets the highest ratings. Trump got 236 minutes. It wasn't just 86 minutes, according to Tyndall's
on all of the networks.
Analysis. On all the networks. And so there's a sense that Trump draws eyeballs. And so he's been featured in a way, you know, people have called this a reality. He's turned the presidential contest into a reality show. Well, it's because he gets eyeballs. He gets ratings. He gets web clicks. And
well, look at the GOP
Bernie
debate
Sanders
ratings, right?
Does
the
not.
debate ratings are a great
But
example.
what is it- what are
18
we-
million for CNN's debate, maybe 8 million for the debate last night. And unfortunately, I have to leave it there.
I'm not defending that.
But
I'm not
what about, what are we
defending that, but I'm
supposed to be
saying
about?
That's what's
Are we
going
supposed
on.
to be about eyeballs, or are we supposed to be about what matters in electing a president?
I totally
In many
agree
ways,
with you,
that
but,
is the story of the
that's what's-
entire
but
year,
that's
I'd
what's
say.
happening
That's-
here. And when you have media outlets, and I hate to bite the hand that feeds, but I will talk about CNN for a minute. When you do have media outlets that are raising their advertising rates because they know that the GOP debate will draw record numbers, and they sell these debates as if they're pugilistic contests rather than exercises in democracy, this is the end result. I know that there are media executives out there who say this is what you have to do to compete, but we have lost sight of the idea that the coverage of the presidential candidates and the debates are a public service. They're not a revenue-generating, effort. And if
Well,
we're
the
able
flip
to
side
get
of
back
that
to that
is
ethic
that
a
these
little
debates
more,
have
I
all
think we'd
been
see
really
the coverage
substantive.
even out.
No, but that's
the
a great.
debates have been substantial, but the media, I think, are also in a game with Donald Trump, where, beat me up, and let me try to talk about you while you're beating me up. I mean, Sanders is not doing that. He's trying to take the high road, whether you agree with him or not, and he's not getting covered.
But
I'll tell you, unfortunately, I'm going to hit a hard break, but it is amusing to me that this was going to be the one show we weren't going to talk about Donald Trump, and here we are talking about Donald Trump. It is interesting how all roads with this campaign lead back to Donald Trump. Jane, David, Eric, thank you all for spending time with us this morning.